All right, we're recording and we're live.
Thank you, Caitlin. Good evening, everyone. Glenn Richards here, Chair of the Newburyport Historical Commission, and we're here to welcome you to our meeting of Thursday night. My notes say the 14th of January, but that's not true. It's the 28th of January. So welcome all to this Zoom meeting. A few preliminaries. Well, actually, before we do the meeting preliminaries, I'll just do a quick roll call. Mr. Christopher Fay.
Here.
Okay. Patrick McNamee, except not Patrick, Peter McNamee.
No,
sorry.
Patrick McNamee is not here.
Right. Sorry, Peter McNamee.
Yes.
Joe Morgan.
Here.
Yep. Patricia Pecknick.
Here.
Glenn Richards, the chair. And do we see any sign of Malcolm in the participants, Caitlin?
I do not yet, but I'll keep a lookout for him.
Okay. And there are 27 participants, or attendees rather. So, yeah, not seeing him either. Okay, so for now, he's absent. So the preliminaries I mentioned earlier are that the commissioners have their audio enabled all the time, and we also have our video enabled, as you can probably see. If we have a public hearing, I'm not sure if there'll be one tonight offhand, and you wish to speak, you need to use the Zoom function to raise your hand, so you can be so we'll know that you want to speak and you can be recognized. And I know, for example, I see Susan Edwards in the attendees list. So when the time comes for your matter, for example, we'll recognize you to speak and so on. And if you're on the phone and want to speak, *9 will raise a hand and *6 will unmute your audio. When we unmute you or Caitlin unmutes you on our end, you also have to unmute yourself on your end in order to be heard. That's about it. As my understanding for all Zoom meetings, although I know some don't seem to do it, but anyway, my understanding is that for all Zoom meetings that votes should be a roll call vote, so we'll continue doing that. First item on the agenda is 93 State Street. Quick review of where we stand with this. Last meeting, we heard from the applicant. They presented some significantly revised plans. There were a lot of questions and answers between the board and the applicant and the architect, Scott Brown, I believe that is. Then there was, no, it's not Scott Brown either, is it? We'll correct that later. Then there was public hearings where we heard public comment, and I took away my notes from where we left off with the commission in terms of what my understanding of how everyone felt about the plans, wrote a draft report. So that draft report has been posted for a few days now. I'm assuming my colleagues have read it. So my goal for tonight is to have you tell me whether or not you agree with the report, and if not, what you'd like to change. And I should say that I already have a change that I decided to make myself. So, and it's in the summary and conclusion section. I'm kind of rewording that a little bit. I thought I wanted to clarify a few things, and it sounded a little harder than I really wanted it to be. So, having said that, I see Patrick's hand is, please shoot me, but Peter's hand is up. And Peter, you're the only one with the hand up at the moment. So why don't you go ahead and speak? Oh, you're recusing yourself, no doubt.
Yes, as usual, I'm going to recuse myself.
Okay. Yes, Pete, that's right. I meant to mention that too. Peter's recusing himself due to being a neighbor of the bank. Thank you, Peter. Make a note of that. And maybe if I just keep saying, it'll get burned in. So on the board, since I'm not seeing any other hands up, why don't I do this? I'm gonna, well, it doesn't do any good for you to scroll down, Caitlin, because you don't have this version because I just changed it late this afternoon. So I'm gonna reread. You can, if you want, you can go down to that page 4 where it has the summary. Or tell you what, I changed my mind. I'll go back to page 1. Thanks. All right, so again, I'm just going to step through it really quickly so that everyone, including the people on the attendees who may not have read it can just be somewhat familiar with it. So the executive summary refers to the latest plans where the massing has been considerably reduced. The applicant did remove some what they call program space, but there are some things, and they also made a change in the cladding back away from the residential kind of look of the clapboards to a more commercial look of brick. As the notes here in the executive summary state that the height is still an issue, and this change back to brick may be an issue. So can you go down to the next page, Caitlin? The image on this page is designed to just show why we pay so much attention to the neighborhood. The area outlined in red is the location of this proposed structure. You can see to its left here the 1980s edition and the historical bank structure, to which these are all to be attached. So it is technically an addition to the original structure, but it's further away from it than it is to a lot of its neighborhood, its abutters in the neighborhood. Okay, and then if you're going to go down to page 3, please. This is another image that I put together taken basic images from the plan submitted by the applicant. And actually go down to page 4 real quick, because this will explain what I was talking about, that perceived height. This is from the bank's plans, and it shows the ridge height, mean roof height, and eave height of the main or historic building. It says 1870 on the plans. It's always, some people say 1870. I've heard also 1871, 72. We'll just call it 1870 to be consistent. And you see here that they're taking that measurement from that central pavilion, which if you look at a bird's eye view, you'll see that that's a relative minority of the whole mass of that building. It's basically a one-story building, admittedly a tall one-story, and it's up several steps up from grade. You see those small windows. So anyway, a casual viewer walking up State Street, the overall impression of height is that where that red line is, at least in my opinion, that's about 23 feet, give or take. That's it's 2210 to where that line is. That's an actual dimension line from the applicant. So you see it's right around there. Okay, now you can go back to page 3, Caitlin. So I put that line in. You see it in green on this illustration. So that's what I'm calling the overall perceived height of the old building. The blue line is the eave height of the current plans, and those other lines, ridge height, 33.4 inches. That's that small central section of the main old building. So I'm not really taking up, I don't know. I'm not saying that they're wrong to do that, but what I am saying is that a lot of what we have to deal with, the applicant has correctly pointed out, is subjective, and a lot of it has to do with perceptions. And I think that it's not unreasonable to say that there is a perception that the main building presents itself as having an eave about where that green line is. The red lines are also well, 2 out of the 3 are from the applicant's plans. That 21 foot, give or take, that little squiggle means it's approximately 21 feet. That's the smaller houses on Prospect Street, 7 and 9, are in that ballpark. The 23.5, that's I think 1113 Prospect. The current eave height is pretty much where it was the last set of plans, about 24.5 feet. So the height is, in our opinion, still an issue. And okay, now you can go to page 4 one last time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read my revised summary and conclusion. All right. So you'll have to just kind of listen to this one. The issue of excessive mass has been improved with this redesign, but not eliminated. At the same time, other aspects of design which bear upon how well the proposal harmonizes with its locale are not necessarily improvements. The brick design is more harmonious with the historic structure, but makes a strong contrast with the more immediate locale. This neighborhood locale, as stated in previous reports, is considered worthy of note and preservation by the Massachusetts Historical Commission, as they documented in a Form G report. This reinforces the need to take very seriously the impact of this project on this location. Second paragraph. Regarding the relationship of the proposed structure to the historic building, the proposal still departs from the standards because its overall massing, footprint and height, is considerably higher than the historic building, which is deemed inappropriate. The proposed location, far back on the lot, may make the structure appear less overwhelming, but only from State Street not from Purchase Street or Otis Place. Therefore, it is the determination of the Commission that the proposed design has come closer to compliance with the Secretary's standards, but still falls short, and therefore we cannot recommend that a special permit be granted based on this design. And that's how it ends now. So that's the revised summation. So I'll turn it back to my colleagues and peers here. Anyone have a comment? The main thing I'm concerned about is I know that both applicants and the members of the public and the planning board, all concerned, will want to know that this isn't just my opinion, but is the opinion of the board. So it is really imperative that if there's anything in this report that people find needing either to be removed, added, or changed, please let me know. And with that, I'll pause to take a drink. Only water, I'm afraid. Any comment from anyone?
I have a comment, and I don't know if it's the grammar, but it's the second paragraph in the summary.
Yep.
It's your first sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And tell me if I'm off base here, but as you read regarding the relationship, after the parentheses is considerably higher, you're changing it to, than the historic building, which is deemed inappropriate. To me, it sounds as if the historic building has been deemed inappropriate.
Actually, I didn't change that. It's still considerably larger.
Okay,
Oh.
But my
Let me look at it again.
question is the final clause, I guess, which is deemed inappropriate. Does that make it sound as if we're saying that the historic building has been deemed inappropriate as opposed to the
I see.
proposed new building?
Yeah, well,
I think
obviously, what we're deeming inappropriate is for the addition to be larger than the historic building,
Yeah,
right?
so maybe just reword that.
Let's see if we can slightly reword that to be clearer. Massing an historic building. Well, I could simplify it a little bit by just saying, let me just make the change and then I'll read it to you guys. Still. Okay, well, I changed it to this, Christopher, and everyone else. Regarding the relationship of the proposed structure to the historic building, the proposal still departs from the standards because its overall massing, footprint, and height, is inappropriately larger than the historic building, period.
Sounds better. I think it's clear. It's clearer.
Yeah, well, it's less liable to be confused anyway, or
I don't think we want to
misinterpreted.
confuse anything.
No,
If I may,
yes, Peter.
I'd like to point out in the second to last paragraph, I think you mean to say Prospect Street or Otis Place in that last sentence, not Purchase.
I did. Absolutely correct. Thank you for semi-unrecusing yourself. Definitely Prospect Street. Wrong part of town. Thank you. Did I just do the same? Yeah, I did the same thing on the draft. That's awful. So I'm getting the impression that no one has any strenuous objections. So let me ask this question of the board. I know the applicant has, is running short of patience, and no one can blame them. This has been going on nearly a year. I know they would love to hear something concrete as to what would make this comply in our case. So I have a thought on that, but before I ask that question, let me ask about the design. We're basically pointing out two areas of conflict with the standards. One, in terms of the overall massing, particularly the height. So one of my questions was going to be, is if the height, and if you look at that eave height, that would be on page 3. Caitlin, if you want to show this. So it seems to me that if the eave height was only about 1.5 feet less, it would be much more in keeping with the other eaves in the area and the older building, etc. It would be higher than some, would be higher than perhaps the one property on Otis Place referenced and the oldest properties on Prospect Street, but about the same or maybe even slightly less than some of the other houses across the street. I'd like to take us just a quick straw poll get a feel from the other commissioners. Would you think that would be an appropriate change and one that would make it more compliant with the standards? Are you all speechless? I mean, Patricia, Joe, Christopher, any thoughts on that? Because I know I'm just suspecting, and we can, and also if you have any questions for the applicant, I believe they are here. I know they're planning to be, so you can ask a question of the applicant as well. So any thoughts on that at all? I mean, if put it this way, if I wrote a report that said that had that verbiage in there, that change in height would remove our objection, would people have a problem with that? If I don't hear anything, I'm going to assume the answer is yes.
I don't think we can say remove our objection, but but there is something we can say, but perhaps not something that categorical, like. But I think I interrupted Joe.
Oh, partly. Go ahead, Joe. I see you got your hand up. What did you want to say?
What do I want to say? I in trying to answer your question, I start from a position of non-objection. I think I don't think the height really of the eave is is not the dominant issue. I think there's still a question of perceived mass, perhaps. I think that's what I'm hearing some of the neighbors say. I think that's what I'm hearing some of the other commission members saying, is there's still a question of perceived mass. I'm not so sure that the eave height, since, I mean, just looking at your diagram, Chair Richards, I don't see that they're so far off, really.
Right.
Especially given the setbacks and the street corridor there that separates.
Right.
I mean, the one place where they really are clearly in conflict is with, I think it's number 4 Otis Place, where this very small neighbor that's the very near abutter that's really only 1 story under eave, and I don't think that's really an issue. I mean, I don't think you can point to that as the average case. So I don't. For me, it's really not at this point not about scale. It's really about materiality of the proposed design. So
yeah, I was going to get to that next. The design, like the cladding and so forth. And you're right about 4 Otis Place. That's why I didn't use that as an example, because it's kind of an outlier. As far as massing, Joe, if it's not the height, then is it just the overall size in terms of the footprint then?
Well, I have not been critical of that either. I don't find that to be, from my own personal opinion, I don't find that to be overwhelming. The mass of the project. I certainly not from the State Street side. I don't think it's an issue at all. Clearly, in the neighborhood, there's some pushback from the abutters, still perceiving it as overly massive. That's not my impression. I don't read the renderings that way. I don't see it. I don't see it as a massive structure. But I mean, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, well, and that the planning board are the ones that have to decide whether or not to issue the permit, and they will have to decide how much weight, if any, to give to the comments from the abutters. Our kind of what we are trying to focus on here is compliance or a lack of it with the Secretary's standards. And you know, I was talking to Planning Director Port about this, and it's a very tough case because, as that first diagram I showed, the one with the red outline of the area, you know, it's a commercially zoned lot. We know that. It is a commercial building. That's a given. But the standards call for compatibility and harmonization, and you know, with the immediate surroundings, not only the historic building that it's associated with, but the rest of the local environment, you know, neighborhood. And that's, you know, so we've got this inherent conflict, you know, there. It's not necessarily an unresolvable conflict. We do have, especially in the downtown area, a interposition, shall we say, of you know, residential or residential looking buildings, some of them wood framed with clapboards, some of them brick, and commercial buildings, many of which are brick, especially downtown. But even outside downtown, there's brick commercial buildings. Yeah, I'm sure we all recall the applicant pointing this out in prior meetings about, due to the way the building developed historically, there were commercial buildings in what were formerly residential neighborhoods, and a lot of the rest of the residential neighborhood is still there. So at any rate, but we have to focus on the standards. So is it, now to your second point, Joe, I'm not trying to pick on you, but as far as the design and the going back to brick and stuff, I know you mentioned at the meeting, and that was why I made it into the report. I was trying to capture your comments about the nature of the design and how that seemed to create what I called a dissonance with the immediate surrounding buildings. Did my report accurately, you know, kind of grasp what you're getting at there? And you know, because that is something that the standards also talk about.
That's correct. And that's really my only remaining issue, Chair Richards, is that it's the compatibility with the surrounding wood frame structures,
Right.
and the trim, the detailing, the trim, even the roof pitch, I believe, really should reflect the wood framed neighborhood that abuts. And I mean, I have no objections to the way the current design is detailed. I think it's a good design. It's got a bottom top and a bottom, middle, and a top, which is detailed appropriately for institutional structure, I think. But it's just in my reading of the Secretary of the Interior standards, it does not comply with the intent of the contextual requirements.
Okay, that's pretty much what I took away from our meeting last time, and I think I pretty much captured that in the report. Now, so
Agreed, yes.
since Peter is recused, that leaves Patricia and Chris. I see your hand is up, Chris. Why don't you get and speak?
Yeah, I would echo the reason I raised my hand is to say basically what Joe said, because I think that as we look at the standards, it's just not compatible. I think to go to your original question, if we bring down the perceived height or whatever that is, we could do this forever. We could bring it down 6 inches. We could come back 2 weeks from now, bring it down some more. I don't think it changes the compatibility with the neighborhood. And I know that, you know, legally this is zoned for commercial, but this is clearly a residential neighborhood. And I don't want to rest on the sort of argument that in the past we've done this and it's been allowed to, you know, build a mill right downtown. And so therefore it's okay for commercial buildings to be built in residential areas, since that's happened in the past. Because as we all know, our homes may once have served as some sort of commercial. That was kind of the nature of things. it's still a residential neighborhood. So I'm not sure I buy that argument that, past practices, I guess.
Well,
I would agree with your point about not adhering to the standards in terms of compatibility.
okay. All right. So, and it sounds like that's your main focus rather than the math. All right.
I think the mass makes it incompatible, as well as the design and materials. I'll leave that to Joe and others. But I think that, lowering the height of this building or shrinking this doesn't necessarily change my opinion about its compatibility.
Oh, okay.
We're kind of splitting hairs when we start to do that, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's not our job to to design this thing. Had you, in your wildest dreams, had you any thoughts as to what you think would be a compatible structure there in broad strokes?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. Sorry.
No, I haven't
Yeah.
thought about that. No.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I just had a thought. Okay. Well, trying to think then if I need to. So it sounds like I can ask for a motion to approve this this report to go to the planning board as amended. If you want, I can read you the amended ending again. That's the only part that's changed since what was posted, other than there's the change to correction to Prospect Street. In fact, I'm going to just make sure there's no other Purchase Street in there. Would anyone care to make such a motion? Really? Do you want me to make it?
Glenn, I was trying to raise my hand to just.
Oh, okay.
To just add that I understand how difficult this is, because as you said, I understand the applicant's argument that it should read as a separate structure because of its distance from the historic building. But then if we read it as a separate structure, it's even more obligated to fit in with the context buildings. And for me, it really still is about height and massing, and I am less focused on materials. I feel like that's cart before the horse. I think that the height and the massing are still the things that make it incompatible. I was actually expecting, after the last planning board meeting, it was mentioned, well, what if the eave line were brought down 5 feet? I was kind of expecting the eave line to come down 5 feet. It's come down, 3.5 feet. But I'm not gonna, talk about materials compatibility, I guess, until I understand how the height and massing can be reduced so that it conforms to the standards. So I just meant to add that. Sorry, I will.
Yep. Yeah, not a problem. And by the way, it's the ridge has come down 3.5 feet. The eave is essentially the same from the last
the eave height. Sorry, the eave height is what I meant. Yeah.
Mr.
Okay.
Richard, this is Caitlin. I just wanted to let you know that it looks like Malcolm Carnwath has joined the meeting.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll assume that he's. I'm not going to. I don't think it's appropriate for him to vote on this because I don't know how much of it he's heard. But so I see you've got him in as a panelist. Would like to hear if he has an opinion. Now should have had a chance to read the report. Malcolm, I assume you can hear me. You're unmuted. Can you unmute yourself locally so you can speak?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Yep, I can hear you, and I see a nice shot of your ceiling, but that's okay. Malcolm, I want to know if you have read the report that was posted, the draft report, and if you had any comments, especially if there are things in there that you cannot go along with.
I haven't really caught up with this. I'm sorry, I'm a little behind the 8 ball with some personal things, so.
Okay.
I should bow out of this.
Okay. Well,
but I've always thought that nothing seems to fit here, with what in the neighborhood.
Okay, well, I'm not sure it requires a formal motion and vote, but I'll go ahead and do that for the people, for just so we get people kind of on the record, so to speak. Then I'm going to put a motion on the floor that the commissioners approve of the draft report as amended this evening. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Chris. That was Mr. Fay. So we're going to skip Malcolm for this vote because you're kind of late getting in. Mr. Fay, your vote?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. McNamee is recused. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Pecknick?
Yes.
Okay. And obviously, I'll go along with it too. Okay. Well, thank you. Let me just make a quick note here. And Caitlin, I'll get you the amended report so that that can be passed along to the planning board. So the next order of business is a project on 2 Jackson Street. Believe they have represented by Attorney Mead of MTNC. This, just to refresh memory of those of you who may or may not remember this, on our meeting of November 12th of last year, this was a house on Jackson Street that wanted to build a dormer. We turned them down and imposed a demo delay. We had some issues with the dormer. They've gone back and made some changes. So I'm going to turn the floor over to, I believe, Ms. Mead, will you be speaking on behalf of the client?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Lisa Mead, Talon Costa, 30 Green Street in Newburyport, on behalf of Jerry and Brenda James. And as the chair indicated at the board's commission's November 12th, 2020 meeting, the commission instituted the demolition delay and reviewed the original proposal to the applicant. Caitlin, if you can go to the next slide, please. So as a reminder, there was a dormer that was proposed. The applicant is seeking a safer access to the 3rd floor of their home. The home is a modest 1,338 square feet of living area, and the lot itself is only 1,848 square feet. So they're working in tight spaces here. The original submission included essentially a smaller shed dormer, a shed dormer, which was even with the roof ridge as well as the plane of the wall. And so what we have done, the applicant has tried very hard to address the issues raised by the commission. If you go to the next slide, please. So he's tried to look at a balance of achieving safer access to the 3rd floor and with the least impactful means. And just to compare what we're going to show you in a minute with what was originally proposed, the applicant is now dropping the top of the dormer down to a foot below the roof ridge. It's now set back 5.5 feet from the front elevation of the house, so it's not detracting from the original form of the front gable. And it's also dropped the exposed front of the dormer from 5 feet and 3/4 inches to 4 feet 7 inches to provide a lower exposure to the street. There was also a correction made in the plans to make sure that the chimney was not removed. It didn't appear in all the plans. There was never an intent to remove the chimney, but the chimney's back on the drawings. So you can go to the next slide, please. So what we've done is we've shown you essentially with trying to show you an example of why we're looking to do what is proposed. So there's an existing section on the top here that shows what happens when you go up the stairs. And so clearly you have to bend over to get up to that 3rd floor, going up that 2nd part of the stairs. And so there was a review that the applicant did a study of trying to comply with the dormer guidelines and requirements in the ordinance. But what happens is there's no room coming up the stairs. You're too close to the edge. So it's unsafe in that regard. And so the last bottom right is the actual, whoops, if you could go back to that a minute, Caitlin, is actually what we're proposing tonight, which allows safe access to that top floor. And now, Caitlin, if you could go to the next slide, thank you. So as you can see on the left-hand side, we've provided all of the dimensions. You can see that the dormer is actually pretty petite in regards to dormers, literally just providing for safe access. This is not to increase any additional living space on that floor. It already exists, but getting to it is a problem. And so that's really all this is. We're not trying to get more living space on the third floor. You can see it is smaller in the front face than it was before, and it's dropped down below the chimney, the ridge line, and away from the front gable end. And then on the side, you can see how they have dropped the pitch on the top a little bit, so it's down, and it still is on that wall plane of the house, and that just couldn't be moved, otherwise it interferes with coming up those stairs.
All right.
So the applicant's doing everything it can to retain the integrity, historic integrity and form of the home, but at the same time making it livable and trying to do so in as least impactful way as possible. And we believe that it continues to meet the standards that you are required to apply in this particular instance.
Okay. Did you have any illustration that compared the original plan to the new plan, Ms. Mead?
I did not. No, I didn't
Okay.
provide that because you have that in your files. So
Okay.
I have it, Chair Richards, if you want me to pull it up.
No, not really. The
Okay.
I was because I was looking for the I can see the difference in the moving it down from the ridge. That's obvious.
right.
I was trying to. I just didn't remember how close the other one was to the front. All I really
It
was
on the
just wondering
plan,
is,
Mr.
yeah.
There's a couple of, you mean to the front of the house or to the
Yes.
plane of the wall?
Yeah, no, to the front of the house.
Yeah, so it was moved back slightly from the front of the house to, if you hang on one second, let me see if I have.
Well, that you had in your slide, it was like 5 something feet. I was just
That's
wondering what the original one was, what the other one was.
I'm gonna see if I have that.
Just a minor point. While she's looking that up, anyone on the board have a question for the applicant? Not seeing any hands.
I don't have that
Okay,
here in mind.
it's not critical.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Ms. Mead. And appreciate if the applicant is here. I'm not seeing the attendees at the moment, but if I assume the applicant may be listening in. I just want to express the appreciation of the board for making the effort to try to minimize the impact of the dormer. We do appreciate that, and being familiar with old houses and houses of this period, we're familiar with why it was virtually, why it wouldn't have been worthwhile to try to move that face back from the plane of that sidewall. So can I hear a motion from someone on the board motion would be to lift the demolition delay and allow the applicant to proceed with the revised plans?
I'll make that motion. I move that we accept the design as shown and we lift the demo delay.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, that sounded like Malcolm. Is that Malcolm?
Yes.
Thank you, Malcolm. Okay, let's go around the board then. Malcolm, you're first on my round here. What's your vote on this?
I think they've met the requirements and I think it's good to go.
Okay, simply yes or no is good. Okay, Mr. Fay.
I will reluctantly vote yes.
Okay,
I
yeah, I
will
know you
vote
don't like dormers. Mr. McNamee.
I will also reluctantly vote yes.
Okay, that would be Peter. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Picnic?
I am able to vote because I did fill out the certification that I listened to the recording of the meeting. I did not participate in the deliberations last time, but I will vote yes.
Okay. Okay, and I will also. So that means, Ms. Mead, thank you for appearing tonight. And your applicant will let the planning board know that they can proceed with this plan and and move forward.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your consideration.
Yep, you're quite welcome. Okay. Next on our agenda is a discussion of 10 Auburn Street. Let me see if I can look at the attendees here, see if we have. Yes. So, Mr. Griffin, we have enabled your audio. I'm just going to give a little bit of background for those who may be less familiar, because we do have some new members here. So I'll have to, even check to see. Well, we'll see how this goes. But anyway, 10 Auburn Street is part of the old jail property. Most of us are familiar with it, across from the so-called mall or mall. It's the shortest way I could put this is that as part of a project to redraw some very peculiar lot lines, and an agreement was reached where the zoning board, I believe it was, agreed to redraw several lot line boundaries so that things would be a lot easier for the owner, Mr. Griffin, to manage, and also would make it more possible in the future for the actual jail property to be split off if there was a need to do that. And part of that agreement was a preservation restriction on the antique properties. That is the old jail proper. There's a jail keeper's house to the right of it as you're looking at the front, and there's one that was historically a stable. I think it's being used as office space now. We've all looked at this this preservation restriction is in the process of being reviewed by Mass Historical Commission. So it's not formally recorded yet. However, we believe it's enforceable by virtue of being referenced by the zoning board as part of the agreement. So, having said that little bit of a preamble, there's, I believe, I'll let you describe it, Mr. Griffin, but I believe this is, you want to put something in front of the keeper's house. So why don't I let you describe what it is you'd like to do?
Okay, well, thank you, Chairman Rick. I appreciate that, Glenn.
Yep.
If you live on the property, my wife and I both occupied that front apartment when we were first together and have lived there off and on. You find out that you're in a fishbowl, and when you're in front of it, you're just directly on the street and on Bartlett Mall. And while the view is beautiful and one thing and another, if you have a barbecue grill or your tables and chairs or anything, you're just really exposed. So my concept is to have some landscape feature solve that problem. And I chose to use elements of garden structures, primarily a trellis and a panels of, let's say, a 5-inch grid of a trellis that could go across, that you could grow vines up on. So in the summer, there would be a little bit of privacy if you were behind it. And yet in the fall, winter, and spring, it would be wide open. And when viewed from the street, it'd be almost invisible because we're not envisioning this trellis to be very opaque. Say it's a 5-inch grid with maybe 1-inch pieces of wood or metal, probably wood. And so that's what I anticipated doing, and then holding it back to where, as the picture here that you have up now shows, as it comes up, you see these slopes all the way around, but you don't see the flat surface that's up in front of the building unless you walk up onto the site. You don't see it from the sidewalk or the street or from Bartlett Mall. So it was easy to come out about 10 or 11 feet and then have a series of posts. Then it became more exciting for me because the part of the jail that was remodeled in 1899 had a series of round bars. They're about 1 1/8 to 1 1/4 in diameter, and they're in the old bathroom. And when I took those out per agreement, when we were redoing the jail, which is, by the way, is now a residence, and you're invited to see it, but in the agreement, I didn't want to remove anything from the site. So all the iron from that building is in the cellar or basement of the new addition. And then these bars, I was going to make the columns out of them that would come across the front. So in working with the materials on the site, I wanted to use Rockport granite, which is what is there. And I'm always out looking at different boneyards or different salvage yards that have granite. And I found two pieces about 5 years ago that I've been excited about and proposed for use in Bartlett Mall as a memorial to the founders. That was rejected by my fellow Parks commissioners as being too monumental because it was vertical like Stonehenge. And so I decided to take those two. I didn't want to lose those pieces because they're Rockport and they even have a beautiful finish on it that matches the jail and matches the coins on this building. So I just laid them on the ground and let that be the foundation for the posts that run vertical. And then the grills, which are roughly 6 foot square, would go in front between those two between the posts. Behind it would be flower garden and but one paved area, which would be squares of black granite with a yellow granite in between. And that would give some privacy for people, you know, both ways that have a little bit of, you wouldn't get much privacy from the street, but when you're there, there'd be a little bit of a veil in the summer months when you'd be bound to use this, not when it's cold out. So in a nutshell, that's it. And I presented it, showed you folks because we're working together and I don't want to assume anything, but I took it down to the city building department and they said, no, it's a garden structure. We don't approve those. So I don't have a building permit nor is one needed.
Yeah, well, and that last part is true, that what you're restricted by is the preservation restriction, which has a lot of language in it about landscaping and that sort of thing. So it doesn't mean, my interpretation is that it doesn't rule anything out. Well, it rules some things out, but basically when a change is going to be made to the landscaping, needs something more significant than putting in a pot, a potted plant. It needs to be reviewed by the commission and given approval. So, so it's good that we're here discussing it. Now, Caitlin, or do either you or Caitlin have any sketch drawing, anything that can give us a more clear idea of what it is you would like to do? Okay, so there's this, okay, I believe this is a drawing, a plan, right? Looking down from the top. Auburn Street is to the bottom.
Yes.
Okay. So am I correct that these two large blocks of granite are they on the lawn now where you plan to put them?
Yes. They
Okay.
align with the ends of the building.
Align with the ends of, okay, so left and
So
right, they
left
align
and
with,
right, they align with the keeper's house. They look
okay.
like they're part of it.
And it looks like,
And the top of them aligns with the floor of the keeper's house.
okay, so the top of the blocks is approximately level with the floor of the keeper's house. And it looks like the blocks are, the front of the blocks is more or less where the, I see the gate opening to the jail yard there on the left side. So they are just right, I don't want to say beyond it because they're not really, well, the mass of them is beyond it. The front of them is more or less where the right-hand side of that opening is, as if you were walking into the jail yard. Is it, am I reading that?
Yes, they don't obstruct the entrance to the gate. The blocks run parallel to the house, to the keeper's house. And then there's stepping stones in granite that would be placed parallel to the blocks that give you access through the grass to the jail.
And are those flush with the ground pretty much?
Yes, they're flush with the ground.
Okay. And since we don't have an elevation here, about how high are the blocks, the large blocks?
They're about 16 inches off the ground.
Okay. And maybe my last question, you've got, each one appears to have 4 circles, and you mentioned these large diameter iron bars. Is that what you plan to do, is put those iron bars in those holes for the bars? Is that the idea?
No, those circles are horizontal. I'm going to need to plug those. If I change the look of the original blocks, I would need to plug those with something. Of course, the bars go vertically. The posts go vertically to hold the lattice.
Okay, well, we are
And
looking
I
down.
have no idea we don't know what those holes were. The blocks are 200 years old.
Yeah.
From an industrial building in Lawrence or Lowell. And they were found when they were excavating to do a remodel into a condominium. These are both buried because they were large and difficult to maneuver.
And do either you or Caitlin have any sketches of this trellis idea that you?
Yeah, there it is. That's it. Thank you, Caitlin. The block is at the bottom. I don't need, because of the granite being sizable enough, I don't need to have concrete foundations or anything. The blocks can just act as the foundation. And then on the vertical shafts there, you see kind of a star at the top. That's the top. And then in between, that's those squares. That's the lattice that would be in that location. And then at the height, if you look at the extreme left, you see the height of the gate. And there's a little block of stone. That's the stone that spans the gate. So the look of these grills aligns with the look of the gates. It's all tied together.
Okay. Let me turn to my compadres here to see if someone has a question or concern or something. I see one hand. Ms. Pecknick, would you like to speak?
You're just asking if we have questions. Is that what you're asking?
Questions or comments. I have something in mind that I must have, that some sort of site visit or something might be required for us to get a clearer idea of exactly, what's imagined here. But why don't you go ahead and say what you want to say?
I do have a lot to say about the zoning variance and the PR. So, the owner has really conferred an important benefit on the city in entering into this preservation restriction with us on the commission. But the owner has also, assumed some mutually agreed to limitations on what alterations can be made to the building and the landscape as a result of the PR. So I think, as you mentioned in the beginning, the owner was granted a zoning variance on the condition that the building and landscape on the property be protected in perpetuity. And I know we have to think about, what a future owner of the property needs to understand about what can or cannot be erected on the landscape. And it's interesting, this was my very first meeting on the NHC back in July of 2019, when the PR first came before us. And we were so excited about, what Mr. Griffin has done to preserve this fantastic building. And so we got the baseline photographs in the PR, and we saw the open landscape in front of the keeper's house. And we had a big discussion that day about needing the language in that said front yard landscape elements, and that the phrase existing open landscape was so important to us. We even talked about how, the alternative ground cover would be okay, but we never wanted walls, fences, trees, shrubs, any elements or structures erected or planted that would ever obscure this beautiful building from public view. And that reference to landscapes is a common phrase in PRs. In fact, shortly after this discussion in July, we were talking to an owner of a house on Merrimack Street who was contemplating putting a PR on. And we said, well, you would need to trim the shrubs and tend to the trees in front, because the public benefit of PR is that the public can see a property that's protected. And then we had a different property where we hold a PR in a house on 496 Merrimack. And, the woman there was very disappointed because we said, under the terms of the PR, you're not going to be able to put a pergola up. because the National Park Service says about preservation restrictions that they must not, we must not do anything to obscure the view of the significant structure or landscape. And I do want to add that this building, the Keeper's House in particular, has such an important history as part of like a early 19th century civic landscape, because before the early 19th century, courthouses and jails in New England were always in the downtown commercial district. So our old jail is on Federal Street, the 1744 Clabbered House Jail, just an ordinary building among residential and commercial properties. But once we got the Charles Bulfinch Courthouse on the Mall in 1805, Essex County purchased a lot on the Frog Pond. And at the time, the water of the Frog Pond was a lot closer to the jail. There's a lot of filling in of the ravines and the banks. And the idea was to bring the courthouse and jail together on adjacent sites to create this civic landscape in which each building was dramatically visible from the other. And so the intent of the design really is that the jail be visible up there on the hill as a public disincentive to conduct, a warning to debtors. And it created what one architectural historian, Martha McNamara, calls a judicial landscape. And it's fascinating to me that they then, in the same era, built promenades and walkways around the Frog Pond as a sort of refined park space, but with a full view of all these important buildings, the Kelly School, the courthouse, the jail, and then the cemetery. So in obscuring from public view any part, an inch, a foot of the Keeper's House, we would be altering the entire landscape of the Mall. And I want to read a little bit from Martha McNamara's book. It's called From Tavern to Courthouse, Architectural and Ritual in American Law, 1658 to 1860. And she says, in Newburyport, the linking of this idealized landscape of gentility around the Frog Pond with buildings of justice and punishment brought into being a new type of specialized landscape. Although dotted in the 18th century with proto-industrial buildings, after the turn of the 19th century, the Frog Pond area was substantially altered by Promenade, Schoolhouse, the new courthouse, and then in 1824 to 25, the construction of a stone prison and a prison keeper's house completed the Frog Pond's metamorphosis into a refined and restrained official landscaper. And she concludes, the open, empty land in front of the Keeper's House was designed to reinforce the prison's message of isolation. Visible to all, the unobstructed view of empty open land of the Keeper's House up on a hill, and then to the left, a building where criminals languished in dark, unheated cells. This is the ultimate of New England's historic judicial landscapes. And so I would be so strongly opposed to, our agreeing to, violate the language of the preservation restriction that we all agreed to a year and a half ago that recognized the importance of an open landscape in front of the Keeper's House. And again, I think we've worked so well with the owner. We unanimously agreed as a commission to allow work on the old jail to continue, even though the preservation restriction wasn't signed yet, because we all agreed on the terms of the zoning variance. And we understand that because the PR is in perpetuity, what we do here doesn't affect what Mr. Griffin can do. It affects what will be on that lawn in front of the Keeper's House, possibly also in perpetuity. So I don't see how a site visit would change the zoning variance or the preservation restriction that it was granted as the variance was granted as a condition that we on the Historical Commission would enforce the PR.
Right. Yeah, no, it wouldn't change, to answer that, or to that last point about the site visit. No, it wouldn't, certainly wouldn't change the restriction or the requirements of it or anything. I was just thinking in terms of, there's there's a line, so to speak, between what's going to obscure the view and what's not. But I have to admit, it certainly since the purpose of the of the whole project is to obscure the view, that it kind of it's self-evident pretty much that it would obscure, just as well. That's the whole reason for it to be there, pretty much. So, any other? So maybe the site visit is not required, as you say. Anyone else like to either ask a question or make a comment? Joe, I see your hand. Mr. Morgan?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to get a clarification from the applicant. Or from the owner, I think I heard him say that the granite blocks have already been installed in the landscape?
Yes, they sit on the ground.
And did that require any review by the Historic Commission to approve that alteration to the existing landscape?
I think we may have a difference of opinion on that, Joe.
I'm just asking the question.
No, I notified you folks, and then I put the blocks in. I'm not saying in that you have to approve it. I never thought that this would be an issue, quite frankly, because it was my understanding, and it's Nick Cracknell's when I talked to him about this, is that the landscape features include anything we chose to do with garden structures. The idea that I would have to come to you to put up a tent or put a trellis up or a pergola swing set is just, to me, not what I agreed to. Now, as I read it, I think the language is obtuse. It says, with exception, existing open landscapes, with exception, and that's the important thing, for approved parking and landscape features. What does the word approved apply to? Is it just the word parking or landscape features? It's annoying that the language isn't more precise.
Yeah.
Well,
we talked about this so much at those meetings in July and August, because at the time we talked about how, who knows what would happen in the future on this property. What if it's a hotel? What if it's a restaurant? What if people put signs up? What if people put trees up? We really did talk about the fact that open landscape meant there can be an alternate ground cover, but that there couldn't be something erected, constructed, planted. I mean, just look back at my notes from those meetings, and that is what the language meant under the PR. So I understand the interest in privacy, but it's sort of an agreement between us as the holder of the PR to say to the public, there's a benefit to you, which means we're preserving this whole view and landscape between the mall and the courthouse, and and so that's just part of what we have to enforce, and that's why there is a zoning variance that allowed the other kinds of work and the subdivision of the lot. And I feel like we've been so supportive of all the great stuff that you've done, but this isn't possible under the PR.
Yeah, this is Glenn again. Mr. Griffin, the way I read that sentence, and it appears again in Appendix E, existing open landscape with exception for approved parking and landscape features. The way I read that in terms of just an English sentence is that the parking and landscape features need to be approved. And one of the things that convinces me that that's the case is that if something was going to be approved or considered already approved, as this PR does have some of those things, they are much more explicit. For example, the proposed additions to the actual jail, you've got drawings, measured drawings with, some of them have alternates and so on, but you've got measured drawings of things that you wanted to have be able to do without having to come for approval and so on. So,
Because those are buildings, they're structures, they enclose space, they can be occupied, heated and cooled. The issue with this is a garden structure.
yep, I understand.
Included. I don't think it is.
Can somebody,
But,
I don't think it qualifies as a garden structure, but can you roll down and can we see the baseline documentation in the PR, some of the
well,
photos?
I think the key one is where you are. You're on the right page there.
I just
Page
want to look at
22.
the photos, sort of the baseline documentation, photos of what the property looked like at the time that we were showing the PR. Okay, so we see what it looked like, and if we can go to the next one and the next one. So this is right. So that's a baseline documentation photo, meaning this is how it looks. And we're saying, yes, front yard landscape elements, existing open landscape. And then can you go down a little bit further? Maybe further. There was one of them that showed, or maybe it was in the plan, there was something that showed a proposed wall on another part of the property, and it was labeled in pink.
Oh yeah, I know the one you mean.
You know the one I mean?
No, it wasn't this.
It was in the original.
Yeah, it was. But yeah, it was in the PR. I know what you're talking about. I believe it was between, kind of in the back between the jail.
I see
there
it.
it is.
Okay, so this is why we paid such close attention to any proposed, things that would obscure the public view. And we looked at this, and the original measurement was, I guess, 14 feet, and that said 20 feet. And then we compared it to the baseline photo of the front of the keeper's house, and we said, okay, we understand that there will be a privacy wall at that point on the property. But the front yard landscape element is, says open landscape, and that's what we agreed to as a commission. We agreed to accept the PR on that condition.
Yeah, and want to make sure I'm looking at this correctly. On this, we're on page 38 here. I assume you can see this as well, Mr. Griffin.
Yes,
I believe this is the space between the keeper's house and the old jail. Is that correct?
It is.
And the wall that's sort of in the middle, it's on the left side of the green tinted area. It has what looks like spiky things on top. That's that wall that if you were on Auburn Street looking at the keeper's house, it would be that the wall around the jail would be on the left side of the keeper's house. Am I still correct?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So both of these are behind, or it's certainly behind the front plane of the keeper's house. Yeah. So you understand what I'm saying there, Patricia? So we're all in agreement that, and that was one of the reasons these were more acceptable, that they were not going to interfere with the view of the house. And I kind of understand your frustration, but what Patricia is saying is quite correct in that, like, we had a case, it was on the old Toll so-called 1690 house. We know it's not really 1690, but anyway, he had to come before before this board simply to change some plantings. Wasn't any kind of permanent structure at all. It was just making a change to the kind of shrubbery he was going to have around the house. And we needed to be assured, we needed to know what he was going to be putting in, and that they wouldn't be something that was going to obscure the view of the house that was protected by the PR. So it might sound excessive to your ears, perhaps, but I'm afraid that's kind of the way it is.
There may be disagreements on that. Let's look at this drawing that you just pointed out.
Yeah.
That grill of iron that's there is about 6 inches back from the front plane of the house.
Okay.
That's much more of a change than what I'm proposing to do. It's much more of a change, if you can understand.
Right.
Because I'm taking down granite blocks there and putting a grill in.
Right.
I
That's
don't
the
think
change
that we did not
that's the
perceive
change that
from
we approved. Yeah.
Well, we don't, from our side, we do not believe that we've ever agreed to limit landscape as far as trees. We've planted a whole bunch of trees. We've done that in the backyard and down the side. It's in the approved drawings of the city. We would have never agreed to such a thing. Now, each person that enters into an agreement can have their own view of what it is they've agreed to. In the discussions I had with Nick on all these issues, and I thought with all of us, we were not limited to what we did with garden structures.
No, and
The idea that future owners here are going to have to come to your group if they want to put up something or plant a tree makes this almost unsaleable to the average person. So it would depreciate the values of living here, I think, in an extraordinary way.
yeah.
So we're going to be at odds on this.
We appreciate Nick Cracknell, and I agree with him on a lot of things, but the preservation restriction is between this commission and the owner of this property forever and ever. And what we agreed to was an open landscape to preserve the existing historic open landscape in the front yard.
I don't believe that's communicated in the document, but I agree it's not as clear as it should have been.
Okay.
Because when it says landscape features, is my understanding that was up to us and not the board, not the commission.
All right. Well, since we probably aren't going to, I think you're quite correct, Mr. Griffin, that we are, as you put it, at odds in terms of our interpretation here. What I think I'd like to do is continue this to give me a chance to talk with people at the sitting planning department and to see if what their take is on this. I have to tell you that based on all the PRs I've looked at, they're all pretty consistent in this. I'm a little surprised that you're surprised, Mr. Griffin, because it's kind of a standard treatment or a standard part of preservation restriction on a structure. It's very, very. In fact, it would be unusual to not have it. Put it that way. So So anyway, I'd like to, I think we're going to have to do a little, have some, talks with the planning department, possibly with the ZBA, see what their understanding was, since they were the ones that issued the permit. They have a role here as well to see if, but I'd be surprised if they didn't see it the way we've been describing it, Ms. Pecknick and myself.
Is there any opinions? Can I hear from any other
I just
board
have a
members?
question.
Yep. Okay. Why don't Mr. Fay, why don't you go first, and then I see Joe's hand is up as well.
I guess it was maybe page 3. I guess my first question would be, who literally wrote the preservation restriction?
Nick
Who's
Cracknell.
responsible? Okay. So it would seem that the issue is, to me, would be in terms of the language or the lack of clarity with the language would be with Nick. With all due respect, I'm not a lawyer, but if I'm looking at letter D, as we've gone over this, subsection G, existing open landscape with exception for approved. And I think the key word is approved, parking and landscape. So I don't know who else would approve it but this board.
Yeah.
Because otherwise there's no point in having a preservation restriction if the owner is going to simply approve any changes. So this is a long document. We've gone through this document. We've heard from Nick. I would have to agree with the other members of the board that spoke that, to me, it's not obtuse at all. It's very, very clear. And I think maybe we ought to go back to our respective corners and, you can have a discussion with Nick. And I mean this with all due respect, because I think what you've done here, as everybody said, is fantastic with the property, but this one's too much for me. And I think that the language is really clear, so.
Yeah, thank you,
But
Chris.
when he said approved, what Nick is telling me, he meant it's approved in the document itself.
Right.
It didn't mean it doesn't mean a future approval.
Right.
So that's the difference, I think.
All right. Well, we'll get back to that in a second. I wanted to hear what Joe has to say. He's got his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say that I have a hard time understanding exactly what the proposal is, because it's very, very rudimentary, the image. And I do believe that if we get to the point where we actually see a real proposal here, I think that I'm not going to be able to respond unless I see something that's a more rendered and perspective view of the proposed project. I have to understand what's being proposed before I can even comment on it. And I think that the material that was presented tonight is it's just not clear. It's not serious. I mean, I think a serious proposal requires a serious presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to, usually these preservation restrictions have at the end of them a little appendix, and they almost all have this, and it's called restriction guidelines, and it's basically a little addendum at the end that's clarifying what things can be done without approval of the board and which things cannot. Nope, don't bother scrolling down, Caitlin. I don't think this one has it. Your PR is a little different. I'm looking at this one is actually happens to be from the Unitarian Universalist Church. It just, well, I picked it pretty much at random, but almost I could have picked one of many. They all have this. So anyway, the purpose of this, the guidelines, is to clarify, okay, what can I do without any approval and what can I not? And they have, so for various categories, they have major and minor, what's major and what's minor, like paint, windows and doors, exterior, landscape / outbuildings, and let me scroll down here a little bit, and heating, air conditioning, and so on. So a typical example under paint, minor would be exterior and interior hand scraping, repainting with, non-decorative or non-significant surfaces as part of periodic maintenance. You don't need approval to do that. Major would be painting or fully stripping decorative surfaces, blah, 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 making, significant changes, particularly with materials. But let me get to the landscape / outbuildings. So what they consider minor is routine maintenance of outbuildings and landscaping, including lawn mowing, pruning, planting, painting, and repair. Under major, they have moving or subdividing buildings or property, altering of property, altering or removing significant landscape features such as gardens, vistas, walks, plantings, walls, fences, ground disturbance affecting archaeological resources. So that's typically what all the PRs have at the end, clarifying what is, like minor versus major. Now, if something is major, as I said earlier, doesn't mean it's absolutely can't be done. It just means that it needs to be reviewed and approved. And we do this all the time. It sounds like to someone who's a man of action, it probably sounds like a big pain in the butt, but it's not that big a deal. We go through it all the time, and these things usually don't present any great difficulty. But anyway, I think as has been sort of hinted at by one of the other members, I think Mr. Fay put it well, of retiring to our corners temporarily anyway, so we can see how we want to tackle what is obviously, I think this is a disagreement that we're not necessarily going to resolve within the time that we have available to us tonight. It doesn't give me any great pleasure to say that, but I think that's just kind of the way it is. I think we have this inherent conflict in terms of wanting privacy, but of course, in order to get privacy, you've got to basically provide concealment for a section of the property that can't be concealed. So there's an inherent conflict there. So what we'll do, Mr. Griffin, is we will, Caitlin, I think you and Caitlin at the planning board, she's also on this meeting, have been in touch about this. So myself, probably Patricia, my vice chair, will, and Andy Port and Caitlin will kind of huddle on this, see what, if we want to, if we need to get the ZBA involved at all in terms of clarifying what should or shouldn't be. And I may also, I have a contact at the Mass Historical Commission. I know they've got your PR down there and are reviewing it. It's been a while now, so hopefully they've been looking at it and they may have an opinion. I suspect they will have an opinion actually on this. I'd like to hear what they've got to say. So we've got a little bit of homework to do there.
Can I say one more thing though, Glenn?
Sure.
The zoning variance incorporates the PR. The PR is between us and the property owner. So the zoning
right.
the
Yeah, I hear you.
ZBA is gonna say, yeah, whatever's in the preservation restriction, and we're saying,
Right.
in the preservation restriction, it says preserve the open landscape in front of the keeper. I
Yeah.
think it's not as complicated as all this, but I
Yeah.
understand that people wanna, you know, think
Yeah.
about, you know, look at different places, but it's the least complicated thing that's ever come before this commission in the year and a half I've been on it.
Okay, do you agree with my inclination to see if our contact at Mass Historical Commission?
Yes,
Yeah, I think
sure,
that's a good
because-
idea.
Because when this came in front of us a year and a half ago, I remember contacting people at Mass Historic and at the National Trust, asking about what sort of landscape element language
Right.
belongs in a PR. I mean,
Ah.
it was my very first meeting and I did my homework, and
Right.
I'm sure that I'm right, but
Right. Yeah.
we can talk about it again next time.
Okay.
When Joe Morgan, it was either Joe or Christopher, I'm not sure, was speaking, saying he didn't think the presentation was serious. That was not drawn for you folks. I didn't know I had to come in front of you folks. That was just a sketch for myself. But I just wanted to make that clear.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I wasn't working on making an application to you.
Right. Yeah, I understand that.
Because
That
I
was
didn't believe it. Because I didn't believe it was required.
right.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Mr. Griffin. That
You're
helped.
welcome.
Yeah, and I'll just add a little bit. I should have probably tried to explain that to the commission that I was party to communications from either the planning board or directly from Mr. Griffin, and had some sketches and so on. So I at least had some of an idea. And as Mr. Griffin points out, they were really just, you know, rough sketches, because his understanding initially was that it, you know, was kind of a non-issue, but obviously it's not.
But Glenn, maybe
Yeah.
could we share with the other board commission members then the information that we did get in an email?
Well, it was
about
basically those drawings.
describing it? But it was, no, we got a narrative, we got a description.
Or,
Caitlin, is that posted somewhere? We got a description of exactly what the
oh, okay.
work is.
Is
Yeah,
this
it
what you?
should be posted online right now.
It doesn't.
But here it is.
Yeah, if you can someone just read it so that people understand what is being proposed here?
Well, it's pretty much what he said. Is this the one you're talking about on that she's showing now?
Yeah, probably. I don't know. Yeah, maybe. I can't read it, but it's so
Oh,
little. Sorry.
okay. Screen too small. Yeah, it's basically what Mr. Griffin described in the beginning about, you know, the granite blocks and the lattice and so on, and you know the spaces between the squares and so on, the patio behind it and so forth. But yeah, we can. It's if you'll forgive me, it's a little long to read the whole thing out,
Okay.
and it would be hard to follow anyway because it's so
Okay,
sort
I
of
got it.
visual. But if you kind of have it, if you read it with the sketch available to you as well, then you can sort of you can make sense of it. But yeah, but as Mr. Griffin says, it really was not, you know, intended to be a formal application. Okay. Let's move to the next item on the agenda, and we'll continue. Well, actually, before we move on, I think we should take a vote I'll propose a motion, just so we are all official here, a motion to continue this to the next meeting, which is February 11, is it? February 11, yes. So the chair is making a motion to continue this to the February 11th meeting. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Second.
Okay, thank you. I heard Mr. Fay and somebody else. So Malcolm, if you're there, do you have a vote on this? Is he still here? Let's see.
I'm sorry, what?
Do you have there's a motion, there's a motion to continue this discussion of the PR related to the old jail to our next meeting because we got to resolve some things.
Yes.
Okay, that was a yes. And sorry, I lost my place. Mr. Fay?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes,
Okay, Ms. Picnic?
Yes.
Okay, and I'll vote yes too. All right, so we'll just to make that nice and official, we're continuing that. Okay, now we can move on to the Museum of Old Newbury, commonly and often referred to as the Cushing House Museum, but it is the Museum of Old Newbury. And let's see if I hope our attendee is still here. Yep, Susan Edwards is still here. So let me see. The most of you were around for the last round of this. The Museum of Old Newbury has been doing a lot of work. There's a major project on the electrical system. We're not about that tonight. There were a project that was broken up into a couple parts around the landscaping. Here we go with landscaping again. They are applying for Community Preservation Act funding. And so they have an application going in for this year for the I think it's the either second or third, but anyway, final phase of this. A third and final phase is what my notes have. So I'm going to let Ms. Edwards describe what it is they want to do. And I also have, hopefully you saw that there was a memo that I already drafted expressing the support of the commission for the project, for the really it's not for the project so much as the CPC application for the work. So I'm going to, hopefully you've had a chance to look at that, because there'll be a motion that the board would like to, send that draft along. So having said that, Susan, you should be able to speak at this point if you'd like to tell us a little bit more about your application and so on.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. I sent a draft application, which I guess is what is up on the screen, as well as a summary proposal to Chairman Richards, and also a number of photographs and plans if those are required. This is our third and final phase in 2000, I believe it was 2019. The CPC approved a grant for phase one, which was the laundry yard behind the Cushing House. Phase two, which was approved last year by the CPC and the City Council, is for phase two, which is going to be the restoration and rehabilitation of the courtyard behind the Cushing House. And this one addresses what I call, it's listed differently on some of the plans. I call it the carriage path to the carriage barn. On some of the plans it's listed as an alley, which doesn't really describe it historically. It runs from Fruit Street to the carriage barn. And the other area that we're focusing on this year is the orchard and nursery garden, which runs from the formal rose garden to the Perkins Printing and Engraving Building. And this will make all of our landscape areas contiguously ADA accessible. We are hoping to use them more and more, especially because of the pandemic, for programming, for demonstrations, for workshops. And right now, if you could go, Caitlin, please, to that first photograph that appears there. This is the current view of the carriage path to the barn. As you can see, it's a combination of sod, cobble, granite, and dilapidated fences. We also have a granite wall which goes underneath that fence to the right of the photograph. And with private funding this year, we have rebuilt that granite path, which was in danger of collapse because of the drainage and the grading in the courtyard and the carriage path as it is now. So this part of the project would correct that drainage so that the water does not go into the granite path. And it would involve removing all of the cobblestones and granite pieces, regrading, cleaning, salvaging the materials, and providing the proper borrow fill, and putting it back as it was during the late 19th century when the Cushing family lived there. In addition, if you can, I think there's another photograph, Caitlin, that shows a close-up, yes, of the bulkhead and the ramp. into the carriage barn. The bulkhead is no longer functional and we want to remove it and put a flat covering. And the ramp is very dangerous. It's not to grade. It is wood. It is slippery. And our landscape architect proposed a split ramp that would allow us to place it back when we were moving large pieces in and out of the carriage barn, but also just to have the right ramp when we needed it to provide footpath entry into the carriage barn.
Pardon the interruption, Susan. This is a separate structure than the Mint structure. Is that correct?
Very, very separate. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
This was built in 1808. It was oriented toward High Street in the late, I want to say 1860s, 1870, when the first Mrs. Cushing died. Head of household changed, and the sons and their spouses decided to purchase the property next door, which is now 20 Fruit Street, reorient the carriage barn so that the entrance was onto Fruit Street rather than onto High Street, and establish a garden from High Street to the back of the property.
Oh, okay. So if I was, let's say, holding the camera, taking this picture, Fruit Street would be directly behind me.
Directly behind you. And 20
Right.
Fruit Street would be to your right.
Right. And High Street would be to my left.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So the Mint is also down somewhere to the right as well.
Mint is behind the carriage barn and to the right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And we'll get there in a minute.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
So, so as I said, most of this work involves removing, salvaging, cleaning, and grading, drainage, and relaying the 19th century surface. Part 2, which has already been funded, involves the reconstruction of the fence that you see there to the left, which will also provide a gate from the courtyard into this carriage path so that we will have a larger open space.
Okay.
So let's move on. I mean, I think we can just click through these other slides pretty quickly. That's another view of it out to Fruit Street. And that is, it's too small for me to see, but it's from our landscape architect's plans, which shows you what the recommendations and treatment plans are for those areas.
Oh, I see.
It's probably pretty hard to read unless you've had a chance to.
Yeah, well, fortunately, I have a big screen. I see what you mean. This one, those two pictures that we spent some time on here, they're called alley.
Alley.
Yes, looking towards you can see it says 3-story wood frame structure. That's the barn, and I see what you mean now. The engraving or what we call a mint is off to the upper right in this particular plot. Yep. Yeah, I see the garden there as well. Okay, so
the second part of this project is what we call the orchard nursery garden. And this is from the back of the carriage barn. That is a pathway directly to the Perkins Printing and Engraving building. We use this area. You actually can't see it in this photograph, but just past the carriage barn, there's a large lawn area to the right. Mm-hmm. And we use that for programs, tented programs, and we hope to use it more. Our 2021 programs are scheduled, as many of them, as outside programs as well as virtual programs until we know what the result of the vaccination is going to be for physical programs. The path is those series of granite pieces which are bordered by cobblestones that are compatible with the courtyard and the alleyway, and then down below with a brick edging and cobblestones. As you can see, the fence to the left on the perimeter has collapsed. And the building in the distance is the Perkins Printing and Engraving plant.
Right.
What the plan calls for here is to remove all of the existing materials, clean them, salvage them, and replace the cobblestones and lower down the brick, and to widen the granite pieces so they will meet ADA accessibility, which will probably mean approximately 1.5 to 2 granite pieces across rather than 1 granite piece, so that it will be wheelchair accessible. And all of these plans were part of a planning grant with the Mass Historical Commission to restore and rehabilitate the property for 21st century use. And these have all been approved, although we will go back to Mass Historical. Our plan is to apply for 50% of the funds from the CPC and the other 50% from Mass Historical. So they will be reviewing these plans.
All right. Okay. That's really encouraging that to hear that you're able to meet the ADA requirements and make things accessible, and yet not and yet be consistent with the historical nature of the landscaping or the property in this case. That's really encouraging that that kind of solution was able to be found.
And that's been our intent all along, that the integrity of the landscape remains, but that we haven't significantly changed it, and that it will become more of a public place. As I have said in my proposal to the CPC, our visitation in the garden increased dramatically this past summer, spring, summer, and fall.
I'm not surprised.
Actually used it for respite, for reading, for reflecting. And we want people to be able to access it because it is open to the public dawn to dusk.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that. I know I've seen on the times I've been out in some of the public places in the city that, especially if it's a nice day, and especially if it's a weekend, there's a lot of people out because otherwise we're just going crazy indoors. All right, I don't want to drag this out. Did you have more to say, or was?
No, that's basically it. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Ms. Edwards. So, commissioners, what do you think? I don't know if you had a chance to read the letter. Actually, it was yes. So it basically says that. Oh, there it is. Thank you, Caitlin. That I want to convey our strong support for their application for the CPC funding based on the significance of the Cushing House grounds, and that I know I personally feel that in some cases, you look at let's take the Unitarian Universalist Church, right? They have a little bit of grounds, but the grounds really aren't much of a thing that much, even more so, let's say, with the Central Church. But in this case, because you've got multiple buildings, you've got the Cushing House itself, you've got the barn, you've got the engraving place, you've got, a lawn, you've got gardens, you've got that cute little garden structure that's up by High Street. I believe that's part of your property, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So, it all kind of is part of that whole little, it's almost like walking back in history to walk in there. So I think it's really a wonderful thing to be able to preserve that whole thing. That's my personal opinion. I'm not here to twist anyone's arm. So I hope that the board will join me in supporting this application. Does anyone have any questions for Susan Edwards?
No, I'm so excited about the preservation of historic landscapes, as you know from our last.
Yeah, right, really. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Would anyone, since you muted yourself again, would anyone care to make a motion? I just say that because typically in these meetings, the chair doesn't normally make the motions themselves. Usually a member of a board makes a motion. And in this case, the motion would be to approve the sending of this letter of support on behalf that Ms. Edwards can include it with her application to the CPC.
Yes, I will make that motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Patricia, is there a second? Malcolm, I see you raising your hand, but other people can't necessarily see that, so you have to say it audibly. Your mic is still on. Just speak up. Say you second it.
Second,
Thank you. Okay, very good. All right, so let me go back to my. Hang on a second here. I want to keep myself organized. So, Malcolm, what's your vote? Yes or no?
yes.
Okay, Mr. Christopher Fay.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Mr. McNamee.
Yes.
That would be Peter. Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Pecknick.
Yes.
Okay, and myself is also a yes. So that's good. So what that means, Susan, is that we'll go ahead and I guess give you a copy of this. I'll sign it either somehow magically electronically, or I can pop into City Hall to sign it, whatever. We'll make sure that I know you've got a deadline coming right up in a few days to get this in. So we'll try to get it to you so that you can include it with your package for the CPC.
Great, thank you. Actually, if you were to email it to me
Yeah.
with your signature, I'm still working remotely, but it
Okay.
will go to the office and we are printing one full copy and then sending out the additional copies to be printed. So if we could have it by
Oh, okay.
Tuesday, that would be great.
All right, let me make a note to do that. I can do that. I can make a PDF file of a version of it that I have signed. So, but let me make a note of that so I don't forget to do it. Make signed copy for. Okay, and I'll, you'll get that, Caitlin, as well as you, Susan.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Edwards. Okay, sure. We can do that. Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. Thank you for attending. Next item on the agenda, there was an item on the agenda for about building codes as related to historic structures. And there was a memo from KP Law and so on. That's being continued by request to the 11 February meeting. So Andy Port could be with us for that. All right. There's also there was a draft letter of support for an application from the planning. Actually, it's kind of a joint application from us, the NHC, and the planning department, that for some grant money. This is from the Mass Historical Commission. They've got some grant money available, and this would help us hire someone to update our listing of contributing properties and getting Form Bs written up for properties and so on. Caitlin has, can you go back to that map for a second, Caitlin? So Caitlin is showing a map. The blue area is the so-called Newburyport Historic District, National Register Historic District. And the little red and green dots, the green dots are properties that were noted as contributing and have Form Bs. The red dots are candidates, I believe, that they're not included as now I'm not it's not clear to me, and I'd have to ask Diane, unless you know, Caitlin. Those red dots, I understand they're not listed as either contributing or intrusive. It doesn't necessarily mean they're old, though. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, so I think maybe the first cut of this might be to see which of those is a candidate for inclusion. Anyway, so Diane Boisvert, who works in the planning department, spent I don't know how long it took her, but she's an angel for doing this. This is going to be really helpful. Okay, now you can go to page 2, Caitlin. This is a draft memo that was actually drafted by Nancy London, is it?
That's right. She's our grant writer.
Right, and she did a great job, actually. It's addressed to Mr. Steinitz. Mr. Steinitz, that's Michael Steinitz. He's with the Mass Historical Commission. He's the one that usually does all the reviewing of our preservation restrictions and so on. So this is just kind of a support letter, very similar to what we were just talking about for the CPC application for the Cushing House. This would be a letter from the commission urging him to grant or seriously consider the grant proposal that's being submitted by the city for this Mass Historic thing. So I hope I've adequately described it. I know, Patricia, you're familiar with it, and Caitlin, you are. Would either of you like to add anything to what I've already said to try to clarify what it's all about, or do you think it's pretty clear?
It's so exciting. So exciting.
Patricia, that makes two things in a row that you're excited about.
Oh, yeah. What was the other one? I already forgot. Oh, the open landscape thing. Oh,
The Cushing house.
landscape. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, not seeing any hands. If there's no questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the sending of this here letter.
I move that we approve the sending of this letter. This is Peter.
Peter, thank you. That was you, right, Peter?
Yep.
Okay. And seconded by? Seconded by?
Second.
Christopher. Okay. Thank you, Christopher. Okay. The roll call. 1 second. Mr. Carnwath, Malcolm.
Yes.
And it's so, Malcolm, not only can we hear you, we can see you. So it's very exciting meeting for me. We haven't been able to do that in a while. Mr. Fay.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. McNamee.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Pecknick.
Yes.
Thank you. And myself as a yes. Okay, so Caitlin, so we're good to go with that. You don't need like an actual ink on paper signature, right, for that, or do you?
No, we'll put it on letterhead and get an electronic signature.
Or you know what you can do? We can do the same thing I'm doing with Ms. Edwards' one. If you want to put it onto letterhead, what I can do is sign it here, make a PDF of the same thing with my signature, and send it back to you.
Okay, sounds good.
I can do
Thank
that.
you.
Okay. Almost to the end of our meeting, we have the election of officers. Excuse me. The timing of that was not intentional. Maybe that was a Freudian thing. I don't know. Anyway, the election of officers. That would be the chair and the vice chair. I've been in communication with our vice chair. I haven't heard anyone indicate interest in being replacing me as chair or replacing Patricia as vice chair, but is there anyone that is interested in doing such a thing? I should say I have thought about this, and I decided that I know when I first mentioned it, I didn't want to, short circuit anyone's ambitions, but I did decide that given the learning curve and given, that we've got a lot of new members and so on, I thought it, I do have an inclination to continue as chair, I guess, which is another way of saying I would like to continue as your chairperson if you care to so elect me. And I know Patricia has indicated a willingness to remain as vice chair unless someone would like to take on that role. Just so that you're all clear, if you are interested, that I consider the vice chair a real partner to the chair. I include the vice chair on just about everything that I'm doing and aware of. And the reason I do that is in case I'm ever not available or whatever, the vice chair is fully informed of everything that's going on and can step in and, either run a meeting or do whatever needs to be done. Any discussion or motions or anything?
I will make a motion to nominate Glenn to continue in the chair role and Patricia to remain in the vice chair role.
Okay, that was Mr. Fay speaking, right?
Motion, there it is.
Okay, so there's a motion to re-elect myself and Patricia as vice chair. Is there a second?
Yes.
This is Joe. I second that.
Okay, Joe seconds it. So let's go around the horn. Malcolm, your vote
Yep.
on that? You're a yes. Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Fay.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Ms. Pecknick.
Yes.
Okay, I guess I'll vote myself a yes. I'm allowed to do that. Well, thank you all. I take that as somewhat of a vote of confidence, which I certainly appreciate. I will continue to, try to do my best. It's been an interesting year or so for me. The learning curve was a bit more than I thought it was going to be at first, but that's okay. I feel we're kind of, I feel that the board is, I think it's strong in a better place than it was a year and a half ago, certainly when we were going through in the months before I became chair, and even for a couple months after I became chair, I was so new and sadly, you know, not very well informed of various things that we were kind of stumbling around a little bit. But I think we're getting a lot better. Patricia is really a super vice chair. She's great at at researching things and kind of seeing things as they need to be seen in terms of the secretary standards and so on. You guys have been really good. We've had new members. Peter and Joe have joined us, and they bring their unique perspectives to it. Just FYI, Mark Sundron, he had his first reading, and his second reading with the city council is the next council meeting. I believe that's next week. So hopefully he may, I expect that he'll be sworn in time to join us for our February 11th meeting. So we'll be fully staffed again, and we'll be cruising along. So on that, so I thank you for your support, and I'll continue to try to do my best to justify your confidence in me. How's that?
Hey, Glenn, I just have a quick question.
Yes.
Are we now allowed to maybe overturn the election results?
You can do that next. Well, there's two things you can do. You can next January you can vote for new chair or you can make a motion for for an impeachment or something, I guess.
Chris, first, I think we need to storm City Hall. I think that's in order.
Where are you, Glenn?
I've already violated my agreement because it just several hours ago this afternoon, I told Glenn that I was capable of being sweet in these meetings. And I was actually trying today and I couldn't maintain it. So I'm sorry about that. I think one day when we're in person, I can pull it off, but sorry, Glenn, I couldn't.
Oh,
I tried.
No, you were fine. You were fine. And the thing is, you're
teaching all day, and I'm just like,
Well, the point you were making was perfectly valid. So that didn't someone once say that extremism in the pursuit of liberty is no vice, or something like that?
Extremism in the pursuit of preservation is no vice.
There we go.
I'm having the T-shirts made.
Okay, but I believe that was Mr. Goldwater.
One of those two.
Yes. Okay. Well, we don't want to prolong the agony the joy any longer than we need to. So let's just, the correspondence is just an FYI. We don't need to take any action on it. There's a new restaurant moving in. What did you call it? New something?
New kitchen. It's fantastic, vegan, ethically sourced, great. They're out of Worcester. I'm so glad they're coming out here. Yeah.
Yeah, crunchy granola people. And anyway, they're moving into 19-23 Pleasant Street. They asked the Mass Historic Commission for some reason about it, and Mass Historic didn't really have any issue with what they were doing because they really weren't doing anything at that point. They're just making some interior changes to accommodate their layout or whatever. But I'm glad the Mass Historic Commission did weigh in because they reminded them that the building they were in, it's on State Street. Wait a minute, Pleasant Street. I looked up the wrong thing. It's on Pleasant Street. All right, so
Dodge building, is that the Dodge building, right?
Yeah, is that the tall one?
Cafe Commune, is that the building? Cafe Commune, is that the same?
Oh, maybe.
Where they're going?
There's a couple of vacant. There's the Cafe Commune, and there's also with the place where there was the Chinese restaurant there. Szechuan Taste was.
Oh, is that the Dodge building? Okay.
Well, it's one of those two. Anyway, so they've been reminded that that building is listed on the historic register, so there are things they can't do. So hopefully, we won't have arguments to them about, I don't know, plastering the front of the building with vinyl enamel or something. I don't know, whatever. I'm getting punchy here. So, so anyway, that's what that's about. I believe that is posted if you'd like to read it. Maybe you already have. It's just an FYI. So the last two items is the approval of the draft minutes from the last meeting on the 14th. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Did I see Ms. Pecknick flash a hand up?
Okay, sure, yes. I make the motion to approve those minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
Second, Peter.
Okay, that was Peter seconding. Okay, the usual roll call, Mr. Malcolm.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fay.
Yes.
And Mr. McNamee.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
And oops, put that yes in the wrong place. Sorry. Ms. Pecknick.
Yes.
And myself as approval. And by the way, I've been calling you Ms. Pecknick. Is that fine? Is that what you usually go by, Patricia? When you're not going by Patricia?
Yeah, I go by a number of things, some behind the back, some right to my face. Ms.
Yeah,
is
the
fine,
ones.
though.
Let's stick with the ones to your face.
Yeah, Ms. is fine, thanks. Yeah, because my husband and I have different last names, so Mrs. wouldn't work, and you know,
Yeah.
Ms. is fine, thanks.
Yeah, that's fine.
How
I
about
know my
Professor?
wife and I have different last names as well, and the more traditional friends and neighbors, whatever, address things in the most peculiar ways. Anyway, so unless someone has anything else, where the floor is open to a motion for adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Any second?
Also,
Second.
Okay, it sounded like Peter and someone else did as well. Okay, Mr. Malcolm, you
yeah,
for it. Okay, Mr. Fay. Christopher, you in favor of adjourning? You're muted.
My
Sorry.
microphone was up. Yes, I vote to
I
adjourn.
kind of thought you would, Mr. McNamee.
Yes.
Okay, and Ms. Pecknick. Are you thinking about it, Patricia?
I thought I said yes, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you. Okay. Then I am unanimous in that, as Ms. Slocum used to say. Okay. Well, thank you all. That ends tonight's meeting of the Newburyport Historical Commission. Thank you all for attending. I think all our attendees are down to 0, so everyone else has left. So I guess we are done. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
Chair.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Good night,
Bye-bye,
everybody.
everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Caitlin. Great
Good
job.
night. Bye.
Yes.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Good night.